So my name is Michael Libster. I've been in real estate since 1998 as a profession, since the early 80s as an investor. We're out of Bozeman, Montana, southwest Montana.
Awesome. To you, what's the difference between regular forms of, or more standard forms of real estate and exchanging?
It's a good question. I think the primary difference is that in traditional brokerage, you're really seeking the motivation of your client fulfillment, where in our creative real estate market, we tend to be driven more by mutual benefit structured transactions that benefit both parties with a little more transparency and a little more openness in how we structure real estate transactions.
So what are just a few of the benefits of exchanging?
Well, in traditional brokerage, a lot of times you're subject to market conditions. You may be in a classification of real estate that takes a while to move through. The market may be, booming in one area and down in the other. So, looking back at real estate and the other, investment option, which is more like the stock market, we find that if there's a negative to real estate versus being in the investment market in stocks and bonds and what have you, it's that when it's time for you to cash out and time to sell, okay, in the stock market you just get your money at 5 o'clock and you sell at the price that you're willing to sell at and you're done. Where real estate, it can be a lengthy process to move through whatever you're trying to liquidate. So with creative real estate, it opens up the quantity of options that you have available to you to monetize an asset or a disposition that you're seeking. For many people, their reason behind selling, be it real estate, is that they're looking to either invest in a different classification of real estate, maybe they're moving and they want to invest in a different market. So in our profession of creative real estate, what we tend to do is look to solve both transactions in one deal. In other words, rather than you going to cash and paying a broker a fee to go to cash and then taking that cash and going to another market and hiring a buyer broker and paying a fee to place that money, why don't we just sit down and talk about your objectives, what your goals are, and let's do this in one transaction. So in our organization, with the National Council of Exchangers, we gather as real estate professionals from all over the country, and we have 30, 40 different states represented at our larger meetings, and we seek out those new opportunities utilizing the property that we have decided to use in the disposition as a down payment for the next opportunity, right? So in a nutshell, creative real estate affords us the ability to expand the opportunity base and expand the options on how to move through real estate and invest in other opportunities.
How is, for someone in creative real estate, how is their relationship to their client different than, in general, than a standard?
Than a standard transaction? I think in many cases it's a very similar relationship. If you're a good broker in a typical cash brokerage relationship, you sit down with your clients and you're asking a lot of the same questions if you've been taught real estate correctly. What are their motivations? What are the objectives that they're seeking to resolve through the sale or purchase of a piece of property that they've come to you as a broker to represent them on? Okay. In creative real estate, we just expand on that. We have different real estate formulas that we deploy. We have different ways of looking at real estate, different ways of monetizing real estate. But a lot of the counseling questions, the client counseling that occurs, whether it be in a cash brokerage relationship in real estate or whether it be in our side, in the creative side of real estate, a lot of those questions should be the same questions. Okay. In creative real estate, though, we're actually willing to look at what we like to call the hair of the deal, right? So sometimes there's certain issues with the property that are making it less desirable. Okay, maybe for example, the property went through a fire, and the market is apprehensive. They go, God, we don't want to own that because it burned. Well, maybe the whole thing's been rebuilt. Okay, maybe it happens to be in an area of real estate or in a location that has an issue. Okay, so one person's issue, okay, that tends to be in regular real estate brokerage an obstruction to a transaction, in our way of viewing real estate in the creative side becomes an opportunity, right? So if I solve the problem, Mr. Jones, and I fix this problem with this real estate that has kept it from selling on the market, then what effect does that have on its value? What effect does that have on its merchantability? Okay, and a lot of times what you find is we're problem solvers. We're value add, and the value add component of that is solving the problem with the real estate. Maybe the real estate's problem is vacancy. Okay, so why wouldn't we go in our creative real estate bag of tools and say, okay, who represents national tenants? Okay, so what we tend to do in our line of business is we believe in the power of a multitude of people's experience. Okay, and we seek out in our room, in our marketing meetings, solutions that maybe we don't have available to us in a local market to problem solve, to add value to real estate, to make real estate merchantable, okay, or simply to find a tenant. In commercial real estate, we're driven by value, right? So, in residential real estate, it's usually a sales approach or a cost approach, a given condition of market that drives what that price should be. In commercial real estate, it's usually an income approach. So vacancy spells doom for a commercial real estate investor, right? So what I'm getting to in a roundabout way is that, the power of creative real estate, the way that we practice it here, is that we are willing to look at what the issues are and not look at them as problems, but as opportunities. And maybe we price accordingly, okay? And maybe it's something as simple as, this is a desirable property to own, but it's been bad timing, so maybe we ask the seller to lease it back for a period so that we have an income stream justifiable of our investment capital, okay? Maybe we make it conditioned upon lease up, and then we're given time to bring in our talent, to bring in our resources of personnel to place a national tenant or regional tenant in place, okay?
So I hear a lot of talking about formulas. Do you have an example of a formula or a deal that you've done in a creative way that was satisfying more than just that you made money?
Sure. Yeah, many of them. I'll give you one that was a recent one. So I have a friend, a client, a good friend, member in our organization that owns a for-profit school. Okay? And he needed to borrow money. He had a certain growth agenda that he wanted to implement, and he needed to borrow money. So he went to the private lenders. That was the resource that he wanted to utilize. And the private lenders said, yes, we're willing to lend you money, but we need first position real estate as collateral with no greater than a 50% loan to value. So this particular borrower did not have the real estate collateral. So this person came to me and said, Michael, would you put up the real estate collateral, your free and clear collateral, as security for my lender to do a loan? And if so, we will compensate you, and we discuss the compensation. So what we really did was we created a lending relationship. Now, here I am, the owner of a free and clear property that's generating income. Okay, now this requires some trust, right? Because I'm putting my real estate on the line. But the borrower provided me adequate security, okay, outside of just a promise, okay, so that I had the comfort, plus I trusted in his ability to repay that loan that he was going to take out. And I received a fee on top of the rental income. So what we call that is a lease of equity for a fee. So, in general real estate, you buy a building, you have a tenant, you got to work in pest control there, and they're paying their rent every month, and it's a 10-year triple net lease, and that's great. So how do I further monetize my asset? Well, you deploy certain real estate formulas, and maybe that's one of them, right? So I did that 6 times with this particular client over the course of the last 5-6 years, okay? And it took what was producing 8% money and made it 18% money. So, benefited the borrower, he was able to utilize that money. Benefited the lender, he was able to get the security he needed. Benefited me, I was able to capitalize on the fact that I had free and clear assets, and I earned a fee. Everybody won. Oh, okay, why is it that the entire real estate community isn't here in the room working with us? Is that
Yeah.
the question? It's a really good question, Asher. I would say that, one of the limiting factors is that we are an organization that in cash brokerage, you go out, you get your real estate license, you learn some basic principles, maybe you go for some designations, be it GRI, be it CCIM, And you get a higher level of education that allows you to practice in a certain area of real estate that you want to be an expert in. Okay, so that's kind of how the game's played on that side. In our market, we're driven by certain real estate formulas, tried and true, tested ways in which you kind of peel back the onion of opportunity that real estate can offer you. Client counseling is huge. Okay, basic equity marketing formulas and principles that we utilize, certain terminology, and where I'm leading to in your answer is it really requires a lot of one-on-one initially to educate a typical broker or real estate licensed practitioner, so to speak, to understand that they may be operating for the last 30 years in the real estate profession, but they've only scratched the surface of the opportunities that are available when you start breaking away from the mold of traditional cash brokerage. And I would say probably the biggest obstruction is nothing more than, number one, their awareness that we exist, and number two, learning the basic principles and understanding to a higher degree how to approach a client initiative, a client request through counseling and through really coming to terms with what their objectives are, and then learning how to present that in such a manner that you can draw interest in a more immediate sense. And I think that over time you'll find that more and more people in our brokerage community are attracted to organizations, not necessarily ours specifically, but any of the several that exist. So we have the National Council of Exchangers. We work across the country. There are organizations like the Society of Exchange Counselors, SEC, right? And very, very similar way in which they, hold meetings and value education and value these principal formulas and counseling techniques. Okay, and it really comes down to one thing. In answering your question, it all comes down to education, awareness of the opportunity, and education on how to deploy. Okay, and that's probably the only obstruction that has prevented to a degree every realtor in the country doing what we do. So in general real estate, it's all about the client relationship. Let's say you come to me and you want to buy a house. I'm your agent, and we go out and we look at houses. Okay, our relationship is very held close, right? In other words, there's no disclosure. As a matter of fact, it's against the rules of engagement to disclose, right? We don't sit down with the seller and say, hey, my client really loves this house and he's willing to pay you $50,000 more than you're asking. You don't want to do that, right? Because all you've done is just raise the price of your acquisition, okay? Likewise, if you come to me and we're selling a property, okay, if it's a regular real estate transaction, you say, I'll tell you what, this thing has been a real dog. I need your help because I need to sell this thing because I'm in the middle of a divorce. It's flooded 4 times and it's done this and it's done that. Well, in regular real estate, you got all these disclosures and everything, and you want to disclose that, right? So what you've just done is you've set up a real chore for your seller because you've told them stuff that they really need to get out on the table there. What's the difference between that kind of a relationship and our relationship? We embrace those challenges, right? So you come to me and you say the same thing, and I go into the room and I represent you in a transaction. Say, okay, we have a problem property with upside. Okay, so here's the objectives that we're trying to accomplish. We have a seller that needs to sell. He's got some personal stuff going on in his life. He needs to get some money. Okay, we have a property that should sell overnight in the market, but here's the problem: it's flooded XYZ times. Okay, but we've had an engineer out, and there's a remedy for this. And the remedy is, he told us we need to dig down, we need to pour berm. Basically a barrier, or we need to go into the basement and we need to spray a rubber damper, and then we need to build out a barrier around it. And that's going to solve the problem, and that will pass muster, and that will allow us to actually get $50,000 more than we're willing to take right now because of our circumstances. So in creative real estate, we use the problem as a marketing tool for the solution. Now, if you come to me and you say that I've looked at every house on the market, my house is comparable to these houses here, and they've all sold for $429,000. Okay, so but my house, unlike the others, has this, and this is a problem. It's got termites, it's got this, it's got that. It's gonna cost X number of dollars to fix it, okay, $30,000. So instead of $429, which is the price that you were told by the tarot card reader down the street, therefore you can't take a penny less, but nobody's buying it because it's got this $30,000 problem. Well, in our business, in the client counseling, we say, okay, first of all, you need to lower your price, okay? Or you need to cough up $30,000 and fix it, and then you can achieve your goal. Or if you're willing to add cash or add something to the transaction, then we can seek out a new opportunity for you and keep the price where it is and make it the requirement of the acquiring party that they fix this out at their own expense. Okay, great example here for you. And this is the difference between traditional brokerage and creative real estate. Okay, you get a property opportunity and it just happens to fall into an area of expertise that you work in. And a story that I love to tell people is that there was this huge junkyard, just an eyesore, nightmare, okay, located in Chicago. Absolute piece of crap property, was nothing but an environmental mess, okay? Languished on the market for years, okay? It wasn't selling. Another guy comes along one day and looks at this and says, I'll take it, and I'll take it at full price. Okay. Deal closes. Seller says, hey, I gotta ask, I had this on the property for years, nobody would even touch it at any price. Why were you so willing and able? Says, well, I'm a recycling company. I recycle steel, and there's $800,000 more than what I just paid you in steel ready to recycle. And by clearing that land, I can quadruple the value of the land, which is the obstruction to it being redeveloped at a higher value. So because of that one person's expertise and his vision of what the problem was that was driving the interference of that transaction, he was able to step in, get all of his money that he paid for the property and then some, just recycling that, which in fact cleaned up the property. Then he turned around and tripled the price of the property and sold it.
It's like finding the right person.
Exactly. It's almost like a matchmaking service, right? So if I want storage units, okay, and I've never been in storage units, I'm going to go to Colby Sandlin, right? Because he spent an entire career in storage unit, made tens of millions of dollars in that industry, right? Which means he's made every mistake that can be made, and he knows what to do. Now, the power of our group is that we're very open, we're very transparent, we're very sharing. So if you're doing infill mixed-use commercial renovations of historic buildings in really prime locations in cities, and you need some help, you need to know what it is that you should be expecting, because you want to do this, but you don't have any experience, you're going to come to someone like me, because that's what I've spent the last 25 years doing. Okay? In kind, if I want to buy storage units or I want to buy a mobile home park, because I hear that that's a great classification of real estate to be in, a lot of cash money, a lot of growth, high yield, good opportunity, diminishing availability. But I don't know anything about that market. So I'm going to go in the room and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to raise my hand and says, I have a want, right? I want somebody that has expertise to give me some counseling. And you have decades upon decades of experience in that room that is a resource that is available to you at no cost, just because you came to our meeting, that you can sit down and get all the expertise you want. How much is that worth? Right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference between what we do and what your dad does, and a traditional real estate broker out there peddling properties to Joe and Mary Sue, whoever, and I'm not saying that one profession's better than the other. I think both are appropriate, both are needed. All I'm saying is that there's more than one way to look at transacting real estate deals. This is where you really get to have some fun. You're working a different side of the brain here, okay? It takes a somewhat monotonous, somewhat routine kind of process, and you get to really get creative and you get to step outside of the box. And more important than all of that, this is about building relationships. Okay? If you're in a regular real estate community, regular real estate brokerage, you have a client, they come in, they want to sell their house, you list their house, they're moving to another state, you sell their house, you get a commission, everybody's happy, down the road they go, you never see them again. In our business, one deal leads to the next 7.
Do you enjoy your job?
Absolutely.